Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon to talk about hybrid learning. We're going to go into what that is. I think everyone's got a bit of a different definition. I Googled it and it meant something different than I thought it did. So we're going to talk about what it means and some ideas for mixing STEM and play during school this fall, whatever that looks like for you. So my name's Lauren. I'm the marketing lead for Unruly Splats. We're an ed tech company based in Boston, and we're all about mixing STEM and play. And I'm joined by Stacia. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Stacia Wagers. I'm a library media specialist. I live in Missouri. I'm in the Parkway School District. I've been in this role for 8 years now. So we are looking forward to the madness that is about to begin. And hopefully this webinar will be able to get you started or kind of springboard you into what you need to be thinking about before school starts.
Awesome. If you want to know a little bit more about us, we'll be sharing the slides later on, but here we are. And another bonus for Ed Webinar, they have a great community. So you will be getting credits for this webinar and either watch the webinar or view the recording. Okay, so feel free to write us in the chat. What are you most looking forward to for back to school? It's an exciting time of the year, but there's a lot going on and a lot of uncertainty still. So write us in the chat and let us know what you're looking forward to. How about you, Stacia?
Well, I don't know. I really do miss my students more than anything. I know we all have our own personal concerns about, safety and those kinds of things, but it's been really isolating for several months now, and just not having that engagement in kids. Like, I feed off of their energy and stuff, and their excitement and their curiosity. It kind of pushes my learning too. So I really do miss that piece, that component of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody is agreeing with you here in the chat. Everyone's like, I miss my kids. I want to see my students face to face. They miss the routine.
Yeah.
Looking forward to helping kids adjust back to their real life routines. Yeah, I think everyone's feeling that. All right. So a few weeks ago, we did a survey of 100 principals, and I think it was 130 teachers, just to kind of get a high-level view of what was the impact of remote learning due to COVID and what subjects sort of got hit the most and what subjects were okay, and kind of what people are thinking about going into the fall and their main concerns. So I just wanted to share a few of the key takeaways that we got from that. So when looking through the different subjects for distance learning across the board, computer science was impacted the most. Weren't able to deliver quality instruction via virtual learning. And it looks like core math and core English were probably the best. And just some hypothesis around this, I think it could have been just because these are really the core subjects that are super duper important, especially at that younger elementary level. So good to see that those were still able to be delivered remotely, but some room for improvement in the computer science and project-based learning side and physical education. I think it's interesting to see that the teachers and principals in general were in agreement with what subjects were okay with virtual learning and which ones suffered the most. All right, so I'm going to move on. Now, with that in mind, let's talk best practices. We've all been in our virtual world for the last 3 months at least. So what are sort of some of the best practices that you have for virtual learning?
So in this piece, my district released something early on summer break, so probably the beginning week of June. They created what's called the Distance Learning Hub, and they wanted to put 6 practices in front of us that we need to kind of focus on as we're moving forward. One of those 6 elements was looking at synchronous learning. So synchronous learning, we're talking about building community time, and real-time connection. So this could have been your Zoom calls that you were doing, or if you were using Google Meet for your calls, having those connections with your students in real time. Some of us might have done that as an office hour. I know some teachers in my building did it in small groups for kids that were struggling, that sort of thing. But it's really an opportunity for that building community piece. We're all going to come together at this time. We're going to block out the time and really maybe share what's going on, that kind of piece. But we need to kind of look to the next step of synchronous learning. It is awesome to take those opportunities to build community, and I think that'll be vitally important in the fall, depending on what everything looks like. But I think we also need to start thinking about the engagement piece. When we teach students in person, we would not have students sit in 40 minutes on a reading carpet and have a conversation, have a lesson, etc. That's just too long a piece of time. So I think we need to kind of start looking at that synchronous time as, chunking the information together that we're sharing with kids. Maybe we'll talk about intervention a little bit, but sharing with smaller groups of kids, focusing on specific types of learning, or actually, going through and teaching a lesson. We did have teachers that started to use that synchronous time to actually teach them a lesson, put some front load their information before students got online and started working through the activities. And then the next piece I'm talking about, utilizing the tools that will increase student engagement. You might, during that, we call it's termed in my district emergency learning, which I would agree with. It was definitely an emergency atmosphere. But during that emergency learning, you might have really found some tools that kids really enjoyed, that really caused some great engagement, some great interaction with other students and with their peers. So how can we utilize those tools that we learned, those skills that we kind of picked up along the way in emergency learning, and to kind of integrate them into a virtual learning space? And the other key component that I felt was vitally important was having students share their own voice. And I think this might be a key when we're talking about building community in the fall. What safe space are we going to provide kids so they can share their voice, maybe share their story? We've had a lot of things that have happened in these past 5 months that impacted our kids in different ways. COVID is just one of them. There's been a lot of other ones, So how can we do that? Incorporate those safe spaces where kids feel comfortable that they can kind of share their story, tell their story, but also bringing your own voice to your lessons. Especially for me personally at the elementary level, and I've noticed that with my kids in their own online learning, they were more engaged and more successful, in my personal opinion, when the teacher was engaging them virtually, video, voice, audio, in the lesson. It impacted them more than if they were supposed to read the directions and do an activity. Like that did not have the engaging impact, versus them sharing their own voice. Even if that voice simply was just an audio recording of the teacher reading the directions, voice does matter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love your idea of chunking things. I know we talked about that. You were on another webinar with us where you talked about chunking things. And I think that makes a huge difference with engagements.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're in front of the screen or not. I think that's the way we normally teach. And we do that because it's a research-based best practice is the chunk learning. So kind of process through, think about how you can take your curriculum and chunk it into those pieces. Next slide, we're kind of talking about some of those virtual learning tools. I didn't want to just sprout out a bunch of them, so I put some of them on this slide just to kind of give you an example, maybe what my experience was. So one of the ones we're talking about for Synchronous, so this is us having a real-time opportunity. And I know you're thinking, well, Flipgrid you can record and come back to. That is absolutely true. But if maybe I want to have a discussion board and I want all of my kids to participate in that opportunity at the same time, Flipgrid could be a tool that you could use, for that. Say, hey, I want everyone to come on at 2:30 and let's talk about this social studies information that you studied. I personally think that core areas like social studies were kind of left behind for English and math personally. So that might be an opportunity for you to use Flipgrid, even though it's not traditionally used for synchronous learning. Of course, we mentioned Zoom calls. The other one that's on here mentioned is that Loom. Loom is similar to Screencastify, where you're able to record and then post a link for people to refer to. I think that also could be used. Maybe you make the Loom video, okay, we're going to meet at 2:15. Please watch the Loom video so we can get started. Like I said, using those tools to front load before you have that synchronous opportunity so you're not wasting the time, that you're able to chunk the information a little bit better. It's just a suggestion, but I think that might be beneficial too. And one of the other ones on the bottom is thinking about other tools that you are using in your own distance learning platforms. So for example, in my district, we have Schoology as our platform, and some of these types of tools are embedded in Schoology's platform. So look at the platforms that your school might be introducing this year, and how can you incorporate these different pieces, maybe using those learning platform tools. One of the big problems we had with parents had in our particular area was that we were using too many tools. Kids were going too far out into different areas. It was starting to get confusing for parents. So I do suggest having one place to springboard off of if you're doing virtual learning in the fall. Think about, like, this is our platform, but I want to use a Padlet. Great, but have the link in one place so it's easy for parents to navigate and help out their students.
Yeah, good idea. Over communication is never a good thing for for parents. I know a lot of people receive
Right.
feedback that early on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest. If you look at an email from someone and it's more than 2 paragraphs, you might feel very daunted very quickly. So, I mean, they have the same problem looking through some of the things that they were sent, and just following it to make sure they were doing, what the teacher had asked was kind of complicated. Okay, so the next piece is looking at asynchronous learning. Now, this is learning that, like videos, things that you're posting, things that can be flexible, where kids are looking at it at a later time, that it's not a scheduled piece. In our school, we really wanted to provide flexible activities. The catch was we didn't know what kinds of supplies our kids had to use. So when you're looking at what you're talking about with core STEM, and I wanted kids to still be doing design thinking is a piece that I use. STEM, of course, is another piece that I use. How do I do that? So I made a lot of choice boards. Okay, so I had an overall, this is our overall what we're learning about or trying to build, trying to design, or STEM wise, that sort of thing. And then, okay, here are your different choices. Maybe you've only got crayons. Remember at this point in remote learning, people couldn't really go, you couldn't go to a Target store without it really being an impactful trip. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you had what supplies you had at home. So I'm like, well, I know most kids are going to have Amazon boxes at this point. So how can I use things like cardboard and other home materials that you could readily find in your home in order to create something and build something? And what was awesome is because they weren't using the same materials and they had choice, they were more excited and more engaged because they had the choice. The product that you got was so different because they weren't staring at the kid next to them going, oh, I should add a rubber band. He just added a rubber band. Where's the rubber bands? Like they didn't know. So they were able to share after they were done and talk about their learning process and their build process. And I think that just made it more authentic in a virtual space.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
but also encouraging, asynchronous students to connect through different video recordings. Like I said before, use those video recordings as your springboard. Maybe you're front loading something. Maybe you're posting yourself, asking those questions, doing that read aloud, and then having them connect with each other. And then lastly, which we talked about kind of a little on the other side, but should mention it again, is providing those clear instructions for questions and for interaction. Like we need to hold students accountable for their actions when they're online, just as we are currently trying to hold adults accountable for their actions online. But we also need to make those expectations clear. It is not, what is the great word for that? It is not an inherent skill. Like, just because we think they're digital natives and they've grown up with technology their whole life doesn't necessarily mean that inherently they know how to behave and engage in that technology. So, Common Sense Media is a great resource if you're kind of stuck. Maybe you're thinking of a remote learning. Okay, well, these are some of the things, kids had issues with, or, maybe they didn't behave as well as I want. How do I start the year off fresh and make sure that we all understand the expectations and we're holding kids accountable for their learning, but also for their interactions and actions? Please don't assume that they know the right way, to have a great discussion online, that they know the right way to have a flip grid where they're not making silly faces and have emojis everywhere. That is fun, but not always the best thing.
That's a great point. And I love the choice boards idea. We're getting a lot of comments and questions about equal access, and don't worry, guys, we'll get to that.
It's coming.
That's a whole section. So we're sort of leaving us up to that. I know everyone's like, different types of needs for different students. So these are all great ways to sort of, I think choice boards are awesome. We actually have a game with Splats, and we'll get into that later, where randomization is also really fun. So a lot of times students don't like to choose, especially the younger students. So working in randomization into activities and games is also a great way to spice things up and give people some variety. All right.
Okay, so this same thing, just thinking about some different tools for asynchronization, that might be using something like Screencastify or Loom, where you're recording your screen and providing directions for those students. Especially think about that if you are going to use a new tool with your kids. Make a quick video, 2-minute video on how the tool works. That's definitely helpful to parents if parents are helping them and they don't know how it works. Also, another way that you can show them how the tool works and talk a little bit about our classroom expectations for using this particular tool, etc. That's the opportunity to do that, So you've told them up front. One of the ones we're using this year is called Buncee, which is on this list, and that's a way to make interactive slide decks. Is probably the easiest way I could put it, but really hyperlinking things into it, and it's kid friendly. It's kind of like a tiled format, and then Peer Deck, you might be familiar with that. That's also very similar, where it's stopping and asking for assessment and different pieces like that. Just different ways to engage kids in learning when you're not necessarily with them to walk them through.
Awesome. All right. So people are already writing in the chat, but tell us, audience members, any of your favorite remote learning tools that you'll continue using this fall, whether you're going to be doing remote learning or in-person learning or a combination of both. I think there's definitely some overlap between the synchronous and asynchronous tools. A lot of times we use them for both, which is great. Write to us and let us know. I've been seeing lots of Flipgrid, Class Dojo, Seesaw, Google Classroom was another one.
Yeah. I mean, and we can't, if you're at Google and Education School, you can't forget that all of the tools that you have in Google Drive for collaboration, for kids to be able to interact, for you to interact with kids. Feedback is one of those pieces I think we talk about in the next slide, so I won't go into my spiel with that. But, I also want to encourage people, like, this isn't like an this or that. You're not doing synchronous and then asynchronous. It's not separate. Like, you really should be using them in tandem for each other if you're looking at more of a virtual online start to school, So I just wanted to kind of clarify on that. All of the research I've looked into on these two terms, it really talks about how you're using both in order to engage students in learning.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, we're going to move on. Thanks everyone for sharing, people who are commenting in the in the chat. So this was a big question everyone's asking. How can we ensure students get equal access? Yeah, what do you think?
I look at equal access in two different ways. One, looking it through, well, it looks like I had 4 on this next slide, but two main ones come to mind first. One would be looking at equal access and in the lens of identifying the gaps in learning that your students might have, and how can you use your online tools and community in order to help these kids along with the gaps that we're going to see. We know that they're going to be out there. How can you do some synchronous small group together to kind of help this group of students meet up with the next group of students? And that's really going to be dependent on knowing what your essential, learning goals are, your essential skills, and your priority skills of knowledge that you're going to need for each unit. In our district, we have our teachers unpack their units. They identify what their priority standards are, what their essential standards are, and that's how they kind of base their learning. And I think that part's going to be important, especially with the gaps that we might see with students, and different ways to help you kind of intervene, provide that intervention in your spaces. Remember that asynchronous, it could be posting a video and just extending their learning out. Okay, this group, I need them. I saw Google Classroom a lot. I've done this with the Google Classroom where, I have group A, B, and C, and the assignment looks different depending on what the needs of those students are. So the C group might be working more one-on-one, might be doing a little bit more discussion, might be walking them and chunking them through the steps of the learning a little bit more, compared to the A group. Okay, they've got it. And what can I do to extend their learning to kind of challenge them a little bit further as the other group is trying to kind of meet up with them? So something to think about as far as that goes. But the second part, of course, of equity is access. What kinds of tools are our kids in the fall going to have access to compared to remote learning? As you mentioned, Lauren, we were on a call when remote learning had just started, and we had kids that were, the only access that they had internet-wise was a phone, compared to some kids had Chromebooks, compared to some kids had their parents' laptop, or we had families where there's one computer and 3 kids are trying to share it and get online and do their work. And man, was that a struggle. So I hope from our state points of view that we really get assistance. I know some of that CARES money was supposed to be related to that kind of building those infrastructures in place, but we had schools in my state where the kids were sent home packets because there wasn't a technology structure in place, or there wasn't internet access that was reliable in place. And that's unfortunate in a lot of areas too. So there is an accessible gap. I think the main point is you're going to have to be, to me, I would suggest having those upfront conversations with my families and with my district. We have a great program in my district where we have recycled old laptops, old Chromebooks. We've refurbished them, and then we give them to kids that really need them. And that's a program that's run through the guidance department. So your teacher isn't really involved in that. Your teacher doesn't know one way or another, but the counselor does know, and the counselor makes those connections with the families. And then they get the resources to those families to help them out that way. That's one avenue. But another one that we had talked about on that earlier webinar was, there are social services in place in your different areas that maybe your counselor, or talk with your principal, and maybe that's how you reach out and get kids better access to things. I know we have a great one called Family Forward in our location area, and they were the ones, when the schools had trouble, they were the ones that provide the hotspots and the Chromebooks and those kinds of things to kids. And that was in more of our urban areas that they support them. So help is out there. We just need to seek that help and point our families in the right direction if they need that assistance too.
Yeah, definitely. Do you mind expanding a little bit on the diverse and inclusive resources? What does that, in your mind, what does that look like?
In my as a librarian, one of my main roles is curating content. It's not my only role, but it's a big one. And I really truly feel that representation matters. That my coordinator always says that it's a privilege to put content in front of kids. Um, and understanding that that is a privilege, and what kind of content are we going to put in front of kids, and how are they going to be able to connect with the content that we're sharing with them. And I really do feel like this is an opportunity that we can be inclusive, but we also need to be diverse. We need to see the diversity and different perspectives and different points of view, and be able to share that with kids. I think that's powerful. It's, when kids are learning up, that's where they really gain their perspective on life, I think, in those early years. And as a sense of community and sharing, I mean, we've got to make all of our kids feel included into our online community. Um, so I think that's an important piece in building, especially community, but also one step further, the next step from building that community, all of them having a voice, is also producing and putting content in front of them that they can see themselves, or they can see the perspective of others.
Yeah, I think that's super, super important. Um, all right, let's move on. So we talked a lot about this on our call before, but why is computer science important for all students? I think we have a lot of people joining who might not have a computer science background at all. Maybe they've never coded or block coded in their entire life. So why should they care about computer science?
Okay, well, I have really strong feelings about computer science education. I think it is a fundamental skill for anyone walking around. I mean, if you think about it, you're literally carrying around a computer with you in your pocket when you're carrying around your cell phone. You know, when you go to the doctor's office, our files are becoming digitalized, our footprints are becoming larger. Understanding just the fundamentals of how computer science works can really help you in all aspects of your life. But to me, when I'm talking with kids, and if you're looking into job perspectives, what do I want to be when I grow up? Computer science is one of the biggest areas that they have a shortage. We have some big tech companies, startup tech companies in the St. Louis area, like Launch Code, for example, in some of these. And you're talking about very good income jobs if you're able to go into this career field. But we need kids to go into this career field of all backgrounds, and girls especially. Um, this is a great opportunity for them. And like I said, everything that you have that you're carrying around with you, that you're interacting with on a daily basis, most likely is coded in one way or another. And we really kind of need to know how that works. I think that's a benefit. Um, and it's great fun, to be honest with you. I love teaching it. I love teaching it because kids get so engaged and so excited to see, because you're seeing a result
Yeah.
when you're done coding. Plus, we need to not limit coding to just games. I mean, games is huge. It's a huge market for coders, but it's not just that. Almost every single industry needs a coder. Ones that run websites and content, and if you're selling things, if you're a small business,
Mm-hmm.
um, all of those key points, you would need someone that's savvy in computer science in order to help your business go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say someone who is not a computer scientist, but who works, I think it's pretty hard to avoid working with, computer science professionals or engineers in your everyday life. And so just being able to understand them and talk to them, I think is like huge. If I'm, a lot of project managers, and even in marketing, you're going to be talking to people in this career field. So it's
Mm-hmm.
important to understand what's happening behind the scenes, even at Unruly Splats. Like if we've got a bug in our code, I need to be able to communicate that with our team. So
Right.
that
Yeah.
it's
Not
huge.
just, it's not working, fix it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You can't
exactly.
always have that immediate fix, or just really, I mean, how much are you narrowing your troubleshooting time just because you have kind of a fundamental skill of how it works and you're trying to communicate that to someone to someone else for them to be able to fix it. I mean, just having that basic knowledge of how mic works can really put the people in the right place to fix the bug that you're talking about. I just a counter off of that, what you're saying with Unruly Splats, there's another big tech company here called Worldwide Technologies, and I had been there a few times. And for them, it's a huge piece of their collaboration all around to get these different people and aspects of the company to be able to come and talk about what they do and how they help, and how if we don't have all of these cogs working in tandem with each other, it really kind of stalls out. Um, so please teach your kids about computer science, and if you need help, tweet me and I will help you. That's my message.
Yeah, on this point, I think sometimes of reaction we get from teachers is they feel scared or intimidated by computer science. And let me tell you, computer science can look like so many different things. You know,
Oh yeah.
even there's tons of great resources on coding without technology. So just like thinking about how algorithms work and how a computer in the back end is actually working. And it is oddly empowering, even for me, and especially I think for kids, that you can control, you can build something. It's so gratifying.
Yeah.
When you make that turn blue and make a moo sound, it's like, yes, I did that.
It worked. It worked.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I will tell you just really briefly, the most powerful story I have with computer science is that I had a student that had autism. He was on the spectrum, and he loved computer science. He loved explaining how computers worked. He loved fixing the tech problems. He was the tech kid. Like in his class, they would say, "Did you talk to so and so?" Oh yeah, then you send him down to Miss Wagers and she'll fix it. But he was like my buffer before anyone came down to me with a tech issue. And his mom came to me one day and she said, I don't know what my son can do when he becomes older because of some of his limitations and stuff. And I said, pushing him into computer science can be a beautiful way for him to be able to connect with the greater world. That's how he's connecting with his peers right now. And it empowered him as a kid. It was awesome to see his growth through the time that I had with him, just because he felt that empowerment in himself, because he knew something that other kids didn't know, and he could share that with other kids. And that's, like I said, that was his way to connect. So to me, that's what I've always kind of held on to. It opens a possibility, it opens a door that maybe a kid has never explored before. And, it could be really fun. It could be really great.
That's awesome. I love hearing stories like that. We're getting a few questions about coding for pre-K, so I'm assuming that means before they know how to read. So I think code.org has some good resources.
Yes.
Do you have any other tips for the
To
pre-K?
me, yeah, I would go to hourofcode.org. All of, the coding month is December. Trust me, that's the best month to teach kids how to code. I always teach kids how to code in the month of November and December, because they're kind of, they're done and they want a break. You know what I mean? And it's like, let's do something that's awesome and engaging and fun. So I always teach coding in November and December, just for a heads up there. But for younger kids, you can go to Hour of Code, and it has some great filters on it. It'll let you filter out what type of technology you're using. It'll also let you filter out what type of grade that you're using. So for myself, what is that game called? I'm trying to remember. It is by Code Spark, and it's this little like puffball guy. I cannot remember for the life of me what it is called now. But anyways, I teach my kindergartners at the beginning of the year how to play that game. And he uses directional arrows, so it's not using language code blocks in order to move him, right? And they get so excited because you're teaching them what left from right and up and down, and we do it physically. Like, we're going to talk about that physical play, but I always have kids physically try to do coding before they get onto the computer, so they can have that physical hands-on connection of how this works. So we practice like, okay, you want this little puffball guy to go down, and then he has to go across and then go back up to reach the star, right? So what does that look like? Because then when they're trying to figure out the direction, does he go left? Does he go right? I said, well, move your body that way. Which way is your body moving that you want them to go? Oh, and then use that correct arrow. But Hour of Code has some great ones. They have a lot of drag and drop kind of early coding games too for pre-K and kindergarten kids. So there's a lot of choice there.
Awesome. All right. And question to the audience. How are you incorporating STEM or computer science into your lessons? Are you doing it during brain breaks, or do you have a special time? Are you doing Hour of Code? Are you doing it every day, once a month? What does that look like? And that can be pre-COVID, because I know it's, as we talked about earlier, computer science suffered a lot during remote learning time. Lots of Hour of Code, awesome. Couple mentions of bots, nice. Very cool. Yeah, I think, code.org is a great one. Scratch is another one. So at Unruly, we do block programming. So everything is drag and drop. It's super easy to pick up, but it's based on like the Scratch coding language as well as the code.org. So
right.
It's all very similar.
Yeah, and if you are a PLTW launch school, you're using early coding like Scratch all the way in kindergarten. Kindergarten, first grade, they're learning how to navigate and take turns with coding. All the way up, you're going to see a coding element in learning. But I truly love it. My teachers, usually after I teach computer science, then that becomes an extra activity that kids can choose from in the classroom. For example, if they're done with their work, then they can go on Hour of Code and code while they're waiting on others, or as a brain break. Sometimes that's a choice for kids, is to do some coding and stuff. A lot of kids, it's fun because they can organize. They organize and they create stuff, and that tends to be calming for kids too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about hybrid learning. So when we did our survey to principals and teachers, what we found was that many of them anticipated that they would be returning to school in person, at least for a partial time, but then there would also be partial virtual time. So I think that's the case for a lot of schools, whether that be an AB schedule or whether some students will be at home virtually full time because the parents feel more comfortable with that way, and some students will be in person. So I think it's just sort of this combination new world that we're going into, where there'll be some virtual, either synchronous or asynchronous, as well as in-person synchronous time, but socially distanced. So that was a big takeaway for us, is we didn't know, maybe most principals and teachers will expect that everything will be virtual in the fall, but most people expect there'll be some in-person time, which is great. And then a lot of the principals that we talked to are definitely prioritizing educational tools that were flexible for both in-person and distance learning. And so that's really what we mean by hybrid learning, is this sort of combination of both in-person and distance learning. So Stacia, I know you have ideas on sort of hybrid learning too. Do you want to walk us through sort of what are your plans for hybrid learning this fall?
Yeah, so the districts in my area, they're all working together to have very similar types of plans. They're all going to release them at the same time next week. So anticipating that and screaming silently in my head what that means. But we have had an opportunity to see some of the dribbles. Some of the districts have kind of dribbled out what they're thinking. Really, it's a 3 different phase plan that we're looking at. One would be in person, and everything is normal, which is highly unlikely. Most likely we have this hybrid model. And like I said, like you mentioned, then we have the virtual model. Some parents will choose to do virtual, and that's what they will do. In some cases, if the buildings have to be closed down because of an outbreak, then they will go most likely to virtual. We have some kind of documents on that they've been sending out, like how many cases are we talking and that sort of thing. The other piece we're looking at is sort of that cohort style, which I've seen a lot of states have a similar plan. They want to limit the amount of interaction that students have with even other adults. Rotating the adults in more than moving the kids around is sort of the hybrid model that I have seen. So still kind of waiting on more plans. But to me personally, as a librarian, I feel like I've got to sit on the balance of both things. What kinds of resources am I going to be able to provide students if they're actually physically in the building? Versus what kind of content and resources do I need to be able to provide for students if they are outside of the building, if they're doing more of a virtual learning. But another piece, as you mentioned, is those tools working back and forth. Personally, if I will be doing this, I've been asked to by several teachers. They would like me to have things set in place to where if we have in-person teaching, to be able to go in with students and talk to them about how the tools that they're going to use work. How would you use them at home? Like I said earlier, what are the expectations of using them, etc.? How are we going to use them for this particular content area, like upfront, and even maybe practicing those virtual tools or those expectations when we're all together in the same place. And then also looking at, like I said, using Loom, and Screencastify to make those videos up front. Maybe you choose to just do virtual. Okay, these are some of the tools that we're going to use for this class, and this is a step-by-step of how it works, how you set it up. This is an example of how we're going to use it for this particular lesson. So I've kind of been tasked by some of my teachers, hey, can you prepare some of these for us so we're ready to go if that's the direction that we're going into. Yeah, so I can definitely see that hybrid. So please take the trauma of emergency learning away. It's okay. We have passed it. It is gone. So take a deep breath. I know it sounds like a unique concept, and it's definitely in a space that we've never been in before. I totally feel you on that. I totally understand where you're coming from, but I really see some great learning potential in going with this particular model of being in person and then also having that online component.
And for some people who are writing in the chat, or if they're still waiting for a decision to be passed down, or things are still up in the air, do you have any advice for them?
This is what I chose to do. I'm an ISTE certified educator. So for me, I do recommend people looking through and getting familiar with the ISTE standards for teachers and for students. I think that will provide you some guidance, especially if you're trying to integrate technology. If you start school, have these kinds of plans in place for yourself, and to integrate the technology so kids are familiar for it. So it won't be so foreign to them if they have to go into an emergency remote learning situation. I definitely think that's one thing I've been learning on my own. The second thing is just, consuming some of these different ideas and webinars, just taking the step of viewing this webinar and getting some ideas of what we're talking about. I think that can really push you in different ways professionally to kind of seek out more resources that might help you. And even content-wise, my PE teacher, she's like, okay, so how many basketballs can I sanitize before the next class comes in? How's this going to work? So in her realm, thinking about something, we're going to get to STEM and play in a minute, I'm sure. But to me, like, that's kind of where I was like, Splats, you could do Splats. Some kids can be coding it. Some kids can be engaging in the Splats or doing the individual activity, or, you could do rotations with the kids and you don't have to physically move the splat. You just tap it with your foot so no one's touching anything. And I'm like, oh, that would be perfect. So, thinking you're going to have to be creative. I tell people you're going to have to be creative. You're going to have to be courageous. And you're going to have to find a way to empower yourself and learn more about these different tools. And don't be afraid. We're all together in this. I think all of us across the country are feeling what you're feeling and that anxiety that you're feeling. And please be empowered by that, knowing that there's others around you that understand and feel what you're feeling too.
Yeah, absolutely. All in this together. All right, so this is a nice lead in. So how are you combining playful STEM with your hybrid learning model, or for some people listening, just virtual?
Okay, so me personally, this is my favorite. I love it. I love teaching STEM. So I was trying myself to figure out how can I continue on STEM learning. As I mentioned before, choice boards was just one example I talked about earlier. Another direction I sometimes go into is what's called novel engineering, that I'm taking a book and being inspired to create something from what's happening in that story. Novel engineering is you're really looking at the problem solution in the story and what could you create to solve the problem or do something different. That's one avenue, right? But I take it in like a different avenue, where we just let it be an inspiration of, creating your own solution, but also learning about other people. So, for example, one of my favorite people to teach kids about is Lonnie Johnson, and he was the guy that created the Super Soaker. And it's a great kids picture book that goes through like all of the things he went through, that perseverance piece, to go through. Violet the Pilot is another example, which one people might be familiar with, where she's creating all of these different things and some of them working and some of them are not. Just that expression of creativity and discovery. So I'm like, okay, how can I do that in this spot? Because they've told me I'm not going to be able to. It's going to be challenging for me to have a bunch of supplies and bring them into a classroom and let kids build because we can't touch things like that, right?
Yeah.
So my art teacher had suggested making different bags of supplies, like prepping them ahead of time. Like you said, simple things, rubber bands, paper clips, all those kinds of things, and maybe having a bag, um, and where they can go ahead and create the stem from there, that they have their own individual supplies if that's possible. But I do recommend, maybe letting literature kind of inspire stem play. It might point you in a direction and it might be a little bit easier. Yeah, bag of Legos or connectors. Legos are one of the best. But that's kind of my take was. And as far as the hybrid piece goes, this was the other thing I was thinking. How can I connect if we do A kids and then we have B kids? Well, they are in the same class, but they're not seeing each other, not interacting with each other. How can I connect the STEM learning like that? Could I have something where the A kids start the design and the B kids pick it up and go to the next step, or there's some kind of online collaboration using like a Google Doc or Google Slides for them to collaborate and then build and both add their pieces to it. um we one of the great things about STEM is that collaboration piece. Like, how can we kind of manipulate it to meet the needs that we have? Another thing, just a resource to throw into there, one of the resources I enjoy is by John Spencer. If you haven't heard of him, he makes sketch animation videos for writing prompts and also like design thinking. So he had one where it was like design what Batman's layer would look like or what a supervillain needs and stuff. Just kind of taking some of his ideas and springing off of those. There was a lot of opportunity. Like, he had a writing prompt that was talking about create your favorite, what your tree house would look like and what would you add in it. Well, could I have kids, instead of writing, which I could, writing could be an option, but I could also have them build or construct or design. And maybe the resources are a problem, maybe the bag idea doesn't work, and they do the designing at home and then they share with the class. They make a video or they share something with the class when they're in person. So I hope I didn't throw too many things at you, but those are kinds of things I was, kicking around to see how that might work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the collaboration is something we absolutely encourage as well. A lot of times with Splats, people will be broken up into groups. And so one group is coding one section of the game and another group is coding another section of the game. And then at the end of the class, the teacher puts them all together into one coding screen and then they get to play it together. And what an
Yeah.
incredible experience that all of you work together to create this game. And I think it just teaches that teamwork part, which is such a huge aspect of just general life skills. I think,
Right.
someone mentioned it's important to teach, students, especially, CS or programming students, the soft skills, how to interact with each other, how to
Right.
do it. So I think, it is possible to put those all into one.
Just got to be creative. Actually, you know what I thought would be fun to do with Splats is if you had kid A create the program, and then kid B the next day run the program. And if that kid A intentionally put bugs in there, where kid B has to figure out what the bugs are, I thought that would be fun. Debug my program. I mean, I don't know. I just thought that would be kind of a fun thing to create, you know.
Super fun. We have specifically lesson plans actually that have bugs in them that we're supposed to find the bug. So
Yeah.
All right. I know we're running low on time here, but first a little bit about, we've been talking about splats. So what are Unruly Splats? If you haven't heard of them, they're a great way to combine physical activity with coding. And so you'll see there's sort of the app aspect there on the screen. Students are using block coding to control the splats, which are at the bottom here, these blue programmable floor buttons. And so students are writing the code to make them light up and make sounds, and they can code timers and stopwatches to create their own active games like relay races, whack-a-mole, dance, revolution games, obstacle courses. Really, the possibilities are sort of limitless. They make the rules for the game. So we do have virtual options as well, but for that in person, kids just love stomping on them. They're meant to be stomped on and played with. So that's Splats. And as I was mentioning, if you don't have Splats, no problem. This is our Unruly cat. We do have virtual options. So instead of having the physical Splats, if you use our app, which is actually free and accessible, you can play around with it if you want. I'll actually put the code or the web address in there so you guys can play with it in the attendee chat. But the splat tray on the left-hand side here, those are the splats that you can program. And so you can just drag and drop. We've got the little sections that are color-coded, so they're super easy to follow, and students can start making their own games. And we do have a bunch of virtual only, kind of meant to be virtual lessons as well. So Stacia, you've done one of these virtual lessons. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, so my music teacher and we collaborate on a project that was inspired by the book Ada's Violin, which talks about a recycled orchestra that's in Paraguay that tours the country performing. And we wanted to be able to combine kind of STEM and design into this particular unit and make it more engaging for kids. So we've been doing it for a couple of years now, where we take recyclable materials and kids create their own musical instrument, and then they're put in quartets, and then they perform music. So we wanted to add, when the virtual splats came out, we're like, oh, this could be a way that, we can't do this whole unit because we're not in person. He did have them make their musical instruments, and then they played online together and that sort of thing. But I'm like, how can we have the kids practice their ostinato beat? Is one of the requirements, is learning about ostinato beat. And we use the Unruly Splats virtual program in order for kids to program their ostinato beat on using a piano, because he typically uses a piano for instruction. So it was really fun. The kids totally loved it. So it was in a way, even though, we had done this in person, it was a way that we could do it virtually and the kids can still enjoy the unit, because it's one of those rumor units the kids all know when they get to 5th grade, they get to do it, So we didn't want to lose that opportunity of learning with them and stuff. So the virtual splats were very helpful in that.
Awesome. Yeah, we got a bunch of awesome submissions. And we did a challenge where Crash the Unruly Gorilla dance to any student submission. So if a teacher would send us the code for a student-created song on Splats, our coworker, aka Crash the Gorilla, would get in his gorilla suit and take a video of himself dancing to that and send it to the students. So they had a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
A lot of fun with that. So for hybrid learning, we created a hybrid learning guide. So we have a bunch of virtual only activities for those of you who are looking for fun ideas to do virtually. We don't need to buy anything. It's accessible online. But we also have options for hybrid learning. So if you do get the physical splats, we have a bunch of pre-made games and also lessons that can be modified for social distance. So for example, If you had a game that required students to be close together in a circle, you move them. You move them apart. And same thing with relay races, or there's tons of different ways that you can modify existing games and lessons that we have for social distance. So kids are still able to get that interaction and, and connection with technology, but also with each other through these modifications.
Absolutely. And I would also say too that if you're new to Splats or how they work, your company is excellent in support if you have questions or you're trying to get it to work or figure it out. You guys have phenomenal resources and support people in place that can really help you and guide you through.
Thank you. That's good to hear. We do try, and it's part of our, it's part of our memberships too. We're here for all of our Unruly educators, as we call them, to make sure that they're successful and their students in the end are successful. So a few examples, we'll have links in the slides and to these resources, but we have our STEM and fitness activity pack. This one is super fun. Basically, the activities walk students through making a stopwatch and a timer, and then also add in a bit of randomization so that colors represent different fitness activities, so planking or jumping jacks, and then students can log, say, how many jumping jacks could they do in 30 seconds, and then try and beat their time next time. And so that's all kind of done through coding in the virtual environment and then getting to actually be physically active. So this is a great one for if your students are at home, or if they're at school, you can kind of do the activities together as well. The MIDI activity pack, for those who aren't familiar with MIDI, it's sort of a music computer system that allows students to create songs with computers. So Stacia was telling you about her musical Splats activity, and that was through the activity pack that we had. Mm-hmm. So it's really great for students who want to be creative and do different things. You give them one assignment and you'll get 30 different songs at the end, which I think is really the fun part about this activity. And then, there's these two are the same, actually. The third one is our Morse code activity pack, which is more for middle school levels, where students can actually code different messages to each other using Morse code through Splats. So it can either be with sounds like beeping, or it could also be with lights, so flashing Splats. And we have a bit of a fun activity at the end of that one too, kind of Mad Libs, if you will. So that's a fun one.
Yeah, I can't wait to try that out with kids. That one came out during virtual time, and I'm like, oh, that's going to be so much fun.
It really is. So some fun activities for everyone at home to try. And how are you planning to use Splats for remote learning sort of going forward?
For me personally, I think we're going to be able to use it as a way for kids to get up and get moving in their classrooms, even if they're in their own kind of personal spaces. Like I said, I'm really going to connect with our PE department and also music to kind of keep that going. But play is so important to engage kids and get them interested in that sort of thing. And if you're trying to build community, man, having an opportunity just to play and collaborate with each other, I think, Splats is definitely a fun way to go.
Awesome. And just a quick plug here too, we've got, we're calling it Unstoppable Play, and that's just really sort of our rallying cry here at Unruly going into the fall where things might be looking uncertain. And I know we talked about this before, but the importance of play, I think, is so critical to engaging students, to connecting students. So we're sort of rallying behind Unstoppable Play this fall, whether you're at home doing virtual learning, exactly, dancing at home, dancing at school, getting students playing together, whether they're in person or virtual. It's just so important. So we have a special going on right now. We're doing a back to school virtual boot camp with all of our customers. And that's in the first week of August. We do provide online coaching to anybody in the school if the school has a membership. And each membership comes with 12 Splats minimum. And we're also working on new SEL related activities. SEL was one thing that principals and teachers both expressed concern about, sort of, that
Yes.
feeling of isolation while you're at home. So we've definitely been working on aligning with the CASEL standards to make sure that we're helping those students sort of, connect with each other and build that SEL. And then we do have flexible membership start dates. So whenever a school is going back in person, that's sort of when we'll start the clock, but you'll have access to all of our virtual resources before that if you purchase a plan. And we do have special pricing going on right now if you request a quote before July 24th, and I'll post those links in the chat. Awesome. So here's some resources just real quick. Our hybrid learning guide. We have an article, a research article we did based on that survey that I mentioned on hybrid learning. We've got a bunch of lesson plans on our website, unrulysplats.com. You'll see the lessons there. And then we have a webinar actually going on Thursday this week where we walk through a couple of our hybrid learning games. So if you're interested in Splats and want to learn how to implement that in the fall, then we welcome you to join for our webinar.
I'm already signed up.
Nice. Awesome. We'll see you there. I'll be there. Last time we did a webinar on games, it was a STEM and fitness one, and they actually had me doing burpees on camera for the webinar. So if you want to see the not because I'm nervous, but because I'm doing exercise, then who knows? Maybe we'll do that. We'll do that again. Awesome, and that's all she wrote for right now. But we have a bunch of questions that some of which I wanted to get to here.
Okay.
So let's see. So on the choice boards, did you use different ways of exploring the same topic according to the type of students? That was from Sandra.
Yes. There's a lot of different choice board examples out there, but we wanted to go play with the strengths of different students so we could differentiate the learning and what students were comfortable with. So for example, if we were doing a design project and maybe you had limited resources, or maybe that's not your strength, maybe you're not into that, and you are more interested in creating a story and sharing with that, or creating a video, that kind of stuff, we really wanted to kind of open it up so everyone could participate. So there's a lot of choice boards out there, but we had the privilege at the time that we knew our kids. Like I know the kids in this fourth grade class. I know what they enjoy, what they like, because of relationships I already built with them. So I was able to sort of tailor those choice boards to that particular class or another class, and make changes according to kind of what I knew about the students that were in that room.
Awesome. And I know we're running a little bit over time. Thanks for those who joined and have to run.
Absolutely.
We'll be running through a few more questions, but thank you so much for joining, and those who have to leave. Really appreciate you joining us tonight. Okay, another question. We have a question about chunking time. So it says, parents are looking for their children to be occupied for a 40-minute lesson. I've been successful with read alouds in person and have not flipped this to have students watch a video of me and then meet with me because parents see this as homework, not instruction. Any suggestions?
Let's see, chunking time. Hold on, I'm just looking at it myself. Yeah, I know that's kind of the trick. So I think the chunking time, maybe you have to look at it in the pace of how you're doing different activities in that 40-minute piece of time. I think maybe that's the way the chunk has got to look at. Maybe they are watching a video, or maybe the video is further embedded in the work that they are doing. That's kind of the way that I've seen some of our teachers do it. For example, they might have started with a read aloud, and then they're taking that as their example, and then they're providing kind of an activity, and then there's like a break to where they're engaging in something else. So for a math example, a lot of our teachers did, here's our math mini lesson that we're doing, here's the activity I need you to do, And then for your own individual instruction, we use Dreambox as one of our programs. I want you to do Dreambox because that's kind of tailored to the needs of that particular student. So in a 40-minute time, they're doing 3 different things, and they're engaged online in 3 different ways,
Nice.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Hopefully that will help. Yeah, I know it's going to take a little bit of creativity, but you got to think about, like, how can I change what the kids are projecting and seeing in that 40-minute time for those parents.
Awesome. Okay, this is a good question. I think we'll make this the last one. Any do's and don'ts of virtual learning? You said that you learned a lot of what not to do, but you never went back to that. So I like this question.
Okay. As I mentioned when we really, really first started, if you were on early, both of my kids, I signed them up to do virtual learning for the summer. And that was math and ELA based because I didn't want them to have any gaps in their learning, right? I mean, I felt like we did the best we could, but I felt like there was definitely content that they didn't see, right? So the thing that they're using, it is so dry and bland. The voices of the teachers that are on there. Now, these are not teachers from my kids' district. This is a program that they purchased, okay? So I can bash it because they're not my kids' teachers. I'm just clarifying. But it's so bland. It's not very engaging. The person that's presenting the information, there's a video where it's talking about here's our essential question. Here are 3 pieces of that essential question we're going to learn. Here are your essential vocabulary. And then here's passage 1. So and everything is multiple choice. My son the other day was just like, Mom, I just want to talk to someone about what this lady's talking about. Like, I don't get what she's saying. So as the parent, then there's no 40 minutes of time. I'm sitting next to him and we're going through it step by step, and I'm teaching him and modeling for him as we're going through. Like, that kind of thing is not what parents are going to want. As you're talking about the chunking pieces, and for him, it's such a struggle. It's like, oh, this is so boring, So if we can break those pieces up with the play, with a Zoom call, with go to Flipgrid, and all these kinds of tools that we're using for engagement, if we put those into our plans, I think kids will be so much more engaged online than my poor children are going through right now.
Yeah, the key is engagement, and like we talked about all those other, all the things that we talked about today, the choice boards and the, diverse learning tools and keeping it open-ended. Those are all great tips.
Right. Put yourself in the position of your kids, and you try doing it, and go, this isn't fun.
So before we take off today, and I go through the last few slides, I did want to share a video of one of our schools. This was pre-COVID, so this was in February. I'm going to go in here and play it.
When I saw the Unruly Splat, it blew me away. It was what we'd been missing. My name is Jason Behrens, and I'm an innovation specialist with Somerville Public Schools. What makes Splats so unique is the combination of coding and active play, and we're working closely with our librarians and our PE teachers to create some magnificent experiences with our students.
My name is Deborah Dixon. I'm the library media teacher at the Winter Hill Community Innovation School, and I love Splats. Splats didn't take a long time to learn how to use. It's very intuitive. I use them to teach block programming skills, troubleshooting, working out bugs that's in code. I've also am using them to help with interactive storybooks that I've been reading. It's addictive. Once you start using it, your kids will want to use it all the time.
One of the things I learned when working with Splats that mistakes are okay to make, and working with your friends makes things easier.
My name is Chad Mazza. I am the Assistant Superintendent of Schools. We basically here at Winter Hill have just adopted Splats as part of the day. So it's not thought of as a one-off or as something separate. Staff collaboration plays such an important role in anything that we do, with our students, but especially with Splats, because you're really going cross-curricular.
My name is Ben Senecal. I am the PE teacher here at the Winter Hill Community Innovation School. Splats have really opened up PE to a lot of students that normally would be sitting on the side or would choose to be a referee in a game rather than a player. Now they're not only a referee, they are in control of the game. The first time the librarian and I collaborated together with the Splats was actually Splats Olympics night, where we had a bunch of different Olympic-based activities, and then we had a secret agent training course that utilized the Splats in the library. It was pretty epic.
The collaboration we had with Splats was unbelievable. There was weekly phone calls, there were meetings, so it wasn't a one-off, so to speak. It was a real level of engagement and involvement. One of the great things in the new role that I'm in as assistant superintendent is now I'm able, with the experience that I've had with Splats, take it district-wide, and so now all schools and all students will have the benefit.
Really, it's up to the teachers and the students to now turn it into something amazing that's unique, that's their own. And so we're really excited to see what happens next.
Awesome. So I went to Winter Hill in February and shot that video, so we just finally finished it up. So I wanted to share it with you all. It gives you some ideas, some inspiration, even if it's not with Splats. Making sure that you're always thinking about, like Stacia said, would you think this was fun? And if so, a lot of times, it probably is if you think it would be, and if it's probably not if you don't think it would be. So you always see the teachers getting involved there, and I'm doing the relay races with the students, so that's always fun. Question from Jennifer, way to try it and then expand from there. Yes, we have our virtual app, which is free. You need to have a Chrome browser if you're using a laptop, or you can also download the app for free if you're using an iPad. So I'm going to go app.unruly-studios.com. That's the link to our web app if you want to explore. It's our virtual coding environment. And definitely check out our website. We've got a lot of resources on how to use our virtual Splats and kind of tours on that. Okay, so I think we've got a couple more slides here. Join the EdWeb on our community. There's a quiz. I think Regina's been linking you all to it throughout the chat. So if you have any questions about how to access that, just let us know. And thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Good luck this year. And like I said, reach out on Twitter. If I can help you out in any way, please let me know, and I'd be happy to help.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. It was great to be here. Thank you so much, everybody. We've got links to our Twitter in the chat if you want to follow us. We'd love to connect with you, hear more about what you're doing and how we can connect on how to help each other in the fall. So thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it. Thank you, Stacia. It's amazing to have you on. And once again, you're incredible. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us.
Absolutely.